Welcome to the Free Cities podcast. My name is Timothy Allen, and this is the official podcast of the Free Cities Foundation. Hello, and welcome to this episode number 101 of the Free Cities podcast. Now, 101 couldn't be a better number for this edition of the pod. Firstly, and most commonly understood, I suppose, this discussion could be called a 101 since it's a 101 introduction to the decentralized protocol Nostr. It's a discussion with Ben Ark, someone who was involved in the very early stages of the development of the protocol. More on that later. More interestingly for me, though, it has to be the connection with Orwell's 1984, which is very relevant here. Do you know that one? I hope you've all read it. If you have, you'll know that Room 101 was the party's torture chamber of sorts in the basement of the Ministry of Love. It was, of course, a place where the party used fear to break down its prisoners. And in fact, in the book, I think it's actually a metaphor for fear itself, one of the most powerful tools of the authoritarian. Well, welcome to my very own Room 101. It's the penthouse of my podcast where you will discover freedom, liberty, and hope. And that all comes this week in the form of Nostr. Now, you may have noticed recently that I've been talking a fair bit about Nostr on this pod. We're even reading out Nostr messages at the beginning of each episode. Well, it's time to take a deeper dive. But before we do, I want to give you my best 101 intro to start you off. This is important, people. As far as I can tell, Nostr is not just another fly-by-night social media platform that will never get enough onboarders to change the world. Yes, it's true that most people are using the protocol for social media right now, but this is missing the point of this incredible new technology. Nostr, which, in case you're wondering, stands for Notes and Other Stuff Transmitted by Relays, is a decentralized, censorship-resistant protocol for creating and sharing content. It uses no central servers or authorities, and because it's an open protocol, anyone can use it, anyone can implement it and build on it without requiring any permission. In the same way that Bitcoin works, users on the Nostr network identify themselves with cryptographic public-private key pairs, and they are sending messages through a network of relays, making censorship on the protocol incredibly difficult. Obviously, users have the option to connect to whichever relay they choose. So if one relay is censoring content, well, you just switch to one of the many other ones that isn't. Social media apps are just the start, as you will hear in this episode. As we speak, there is a massive and growing community of people building out a new censorship-resistant version of the internet on top of the Nostr protocol. In Nostr, you own your own identity and data. That's what people refer to as your social graph, and you can take it with you to whichever app you like. Now, don't underestimate the power of this. It's very important. I'm pretty sure that all the legacy apps you're using are centralized currently. You are their product to some degree. Your data is their product. You have an identity on Twitter, you have a different identity on Uber, you have another identity on Airbnb. Well, on Nostr, you have one identity that is yours, and you can take it and use it on the Twitter clone, or the Uber clone when it comes, it's on the way, or the Airbnb clone, the same. You take your social graph and your reputation with you, and like Bitcoin, it's very difficult to take it away from you. Now, these are early days, so bear this in mind if you choose to try out one of the Nostr social media apps. And these are a good gateway into the world of Nostr as far as I'm concerned. But also bear in mind that the community that you'll find on Nostr is somewhat skewed in the direction of Bitcoiners and tech people, because obviously we're the first people to adopt stuff like this. Anyway, if you want to have a go, I recommend Amethyst, the app for Android users, or Damus if you're on an iPhone or Apple products. Or just get on over to nostr.com for the complete 101. That's nostr.com. And if you want to find me on the network, it's very easy. Spin up one of the social media browsers, as I call them, and just put the search bar timothy@nostr.com and you'll find me straight away. And if you need any help from me, drop me a line and I'll walk you through it. You probably have worked out also the Fountain app, which is one of the best apps that syndicate this podcast's RSS feed. This is the one that allows streaming of Bitcoin, etc. Well, they recently integrated Nostr for identity on their platform, and it's been an absolute game changer for me. So that's one for another episode. Anyway, thanks to Ben for sparing the time to come and meet me. And I almost forgot. Nostr comments. Let me have a quick look. We've got, Anon says, great episode. That's about the Ben Gunn episode. Again, still lots of people listening to that one. If you haven't heard it yet, give it a go. It's episode 97 from a few weeks ago. Lots of congratulations and LFGs for our 100th episode. I see. Thank you, Bitcoms, Self-Banked Anons. And on again. On. And thanks for the sats, Joe Martin Music and Nathan Day. I've got to be quick. I've been rambling on for a long time. I didn't really even get to introduce Ben, did I? Very briefly, Ben Ark is a developer, Bitcoin and especially Lightning, and now, of course, Nostr. Very big in the FOSS community. That's free and open source software. And well known as being a bit of a lefty as well. Those are his words. More on that in our chat later. Anyway, I've spoken enough. I've got to get out of here. I almost forgot. Liberty in Our Lifetime is now next week. I hope you're coming to that. If you're not coming, you can join us online, of course. If you can't join us online, then, well, I just feel very sorry for you, I'm afraid. Tickets, of course, are available at libertyinourlifetime.org. I'm sure you knew that already. If you didn't, you obviously don't listen to this podcast. Anyway, I've spoken enough now. It's time to go, and it's time to say to you for the 101st time, or 101st time, please, sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Ben Ark. Going.
Oh wow!
Let me turn it.
We're
around.
live.
We're live. Yeah.
No. So the Nostr story is such a. I think it's an incredible story, which a lot of the legacy news outlets should pick up on. The battle which is happening for the heart of social media and the future of social media, because it's so impactful. Like the reason Brazil is banning the use of Twitter, and the reason that Germany's thinking of banning it, and all these other countries are thinking of banning it, because they're starting to finally wake up to the fact that the person who owns a social media platform like that, they wield incredible power. And they can cause regime change. So for me, it's like just a kind of race to the bottom, really, when it comes to centralized social media platforms. And now we have this incredible new protocol, Nostr, which Jack Dorsey is heavily endorsing, which in itself is a great story. The fact that the previous owner of Twitter knows from experience that this thing should be not owned by one corporation, not residing in one legal jurisdiction, and not beholden to the political will of whatever jurisdiction it resides in. And that's really the value proposition of social media on Nostr. And I think it's a huge story, and I'm so surprised that some of these legacy news outlets haven't picked up on that story yet.
Well, it needs an angle that they would like
these billionaires battling it out.
No, unfortunately, it would be something like, alt-right people need free speech.
Do you think you would have to frame it that way? But
for the BBC, I think so. I mean, when was the last time they didn't frame something along those lines? I can't really think of it. I mean, it's a very...
It'd be a shame if they did do that, because it's the juicy part of the story, really, is the future of social media. Because, I mean, everyone's aware now of the dangers of the algorithm, and they're more aware of it now that Elon Musk is so overt in the posts which he pushes and the content which he pushes on Twitter. Before, there was certainly from, the alt-right people, there was some concerns over, the Twitter files and Dorsey and banning of Trump and those sorts of things. But they spent a lot of time trying, maybe before that, trying to keep Twitter fairly apolitical and a sort of safe space. And now it's gone from being that, from being quite politicized in a way which, social media has to transcend it. It can't be owned by a corporation. It can't be dictated to by one person.
But think back to when Trump was banned from Twitter. How did the BBC report that? Do you remember? Because that's probably that would be a telling sign of how they might approach Nostr. Because I don't think they're particularly interested. I mean, all right, they would probably like the voices, the voice, sort of like somebody in a country an authoritarian country, being able to say whatever they want, I suppose. But I don't know. Nostr's.
I guess it would be like the alternatives for the countries which do ban Twitter, and they're using it, like Brazil.
Yeah.
Like, what are the alternatives they're exploring? And a lot of them is sort of Bluesky. And then Nostr had a big uptick of, I think it was like 20% extra users.
What's Bluesky?
Bluesky, so originally Jack Dorsey, when he was in Twitter, he commissioned a project to make a decentralized version of Twitter while he was working at Twitter. But of course, there's a real conflict of interest there, so it didn't really have many legs to it. And they didn't really produce anything for the period in which Jack Dorsey was actually in Twitter. It was then afterwards that they started to create software, and you can build like a censorship-resistant Twitter, but it's much different to Nostr. So Nostr's got this great permissionless development environment. It's got thousands of developers working on things. Bluesky has a small handful of developers, and it's a complicated tech stack to actually build and run, whereas Nostr's not. Nostr, the point of Nostr is you have censorship resistance via resilient infrastructure, and that it's easy to spin up relays. There's a bunch of different relay implementations out there, and there's a whole bunch of different clients out there which are easy to spin up, and they work in a whole different bunch of ways, and they're easy to fork and things. So it's much lighter, and it's much easier to spin up. But Bluesky has had probably a little bit more of the limelight when it comes to alternatives to centralized Twitter, I guess. But Jack Dorsey, quite recently, I think it was about a month ago, he actually left the Bluesky project. And reading between the lines, I suppose it's maybe because his heart's not in it and his real interest is in Nostr. So, right. Which again is a huge compliment. That someone, because Jack Dorsey is not only the old CEO of Twitter. He's a great technologist. He's a great developer too. I was speaking to Rabble about this. Rabble was the person who actually employed him, the person who mostly built Twitter when it started, who's saying that Jack Dorsey is probably one of the best developers he's ever worked with. So he's a very talented guy. And you could tell that because when he came in on Nostr, at that point, all the clients were broken and it was terrible. They just didn't work. The clients didn't work. So for someone to be able to come in, look at the kind of conceptually at what it is and look at the protocol, and then just be able to overlook the fact that a bunch of the clients didn't work properly, and it was just, they were just needed a little bit more TLC and more attention spent on them, speaks volumes to his,
It's interesting because I think that's the journey I've just been on. I looked back at when I first joined the Nostr network, and I think was it 2 years ago? Is that too long ago?
No.
Right, it was then, and I used Iris. And it was terrible, and I stopped using it. And it's only in the last 1 month I've come back on and the penny's massively dropped. And I think a lot of it's to do with the client I'm using, which is really good. But also, I just had a few.
You use Amethyst, don't you?
Yeah,
I use Amethyst as well. Vitoy makes it. It's an incredible, great.
But I had a few Bitcoiners whispering in my ears recently and talking about it and banging on about it, and I got back on. But what's another interesting thing is, I think I've also I've been energized in the last month with all this stuff again, Bitcoin as well. You know, it was been ticking over for a long time. I don't know why. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, this is really important again. And it coincided with going back on Nostr. And yeah, all those things together, penny really dropped. And now I'm like, oh shit, this is really important. And also I wasn't that interested in the voices on Nostr as much, if you see what I mean. I am now. I'm back in it. I've been doing some other things in life, and I came back, and suddenly now, because Nostr's, I mean, let's face it, it's mainly Bitcoiners on there. At least, I mean, obviously, I only follow Bitcoiners. I don't know who else is on there, but it does seem that it's at the moment populated by those kind of people. So if you're not really into that side of it, you're probably there aren't many people to follow, I would imagine. I just think that's probably the next stage for the whole platform.
Yeah, it's getting that gravity of network effect of having a diverse user base. But I mean, I think a lot of the clients, there's a bit of audience capture and they play into it. So when you first install the client, it suggests people to follow, and you know they're all Bitcoiners. Whereas what I want to see more and more is, and I think Rabble again, he's working on this with Nostr.social. I think maybe the Primal guys are thinking about it as well, where you have that traditional pick hobbies and interests, the sorts of, you know, and then depending on what those hobbies and interests, it'll then recommend people who are interested in those things as well. Because I mean, I've done it a bunch. Like I've tried to onboard people to Nostr, and then they've gone on and they've been like, oh, they love the idea, and they go on and think it's amazing, but then it's just full of Bitcoin, so the content really isn't relevant to them. But there's some good work being done on recruiting more users from, so say something like Fountain, which we were talking about earlier. So Oscar from Fountain, I know they're all Bitcoiners, but he's Nostrified Fountain now. Mm-hmm. So all the users can have Nostr accounts and they can engage with Fountain over Nostr. And rebelsbuyingcauses.com, which is an activist website which has like causes.com. Yeah, and it's right, I think it's like 500,000 users or something. He's going to Nostrify that. I was talking with Oscar about the power of, you know, these like a phone game or something like Candy Crush or one of these games which has billions of users. And it's in their interests to allow people to log in and use that with Nostr, because then on Nostr, they'll be talking about the game, they'll be mentioning the game in Nostr, and then it'll drive traffic to the game. So I think that's probably going to be the two big drives for usership on Nostr will be trailblazers like Oscar developing tools to help other, you know, software, games, platforms, whatever, implement Nostr into their thing. So you bring in that social aspect into whatever thing, you know, game. And then the other one will be Elon Musk doing our work for us, just making Twitter banned by showing that it's not a politically neutral platform, and then having Twitter just banned in a whole bunch of countries, and then people thinking, well, what's next? What's unbannable? What's censorship resistant? What doesn't have the drawbacks corporate controlled massive social network has? Because of the interoperability of Nostr. So whatever comes next, it can be Discord, it can be something which is kind of server based, because you've always got that network effect of the user problem with the network effect of users. You need that gravity of users to kind of pull people in. And with Nostr being entirely interoperable via the NIPs, it means that you can create a client, and it could even be like a client which is themed to an interest you share with the people you like to hang out with online. So it could be a British Bulldog themed client, I don't know. So I almost quite like it, because it almost goes back to the original internet where you had these different forums and people kind of group get together around interests, but then it's all interoperable. So you can have your tribe of people who share an interest with you, and then you still have access to then the wider world of users. So anyway, whatever comes after something like Twitter, it needs interoperable clients and being able to share the user base. And Nostr does those things. So
yeah, that's I forgot to mention that as well. It was another thing that got me back into it recently was Fountain. And once again, I've been on Fountain since it started, and I didn't get it, and I actually didn't think it would probably work either. Looking at it,
same.
Right?
Yeah, I was very critical of
but
like
now,
V4V. I was very critical of V4V.
No, I thought it was a good idea, but when I was looking at it in real life, I was thinking that it probably wasn't going to be adopted.
Yeah,
but. Do you know what? Fountain now, I'm using Fountain as a social network. That's weird. Just for podcasts. So I go onto Fountain in the morning and I look through the podcast feed. I don't go to Twitter to look for news now. I go to Amethyst.
Yeah.
It's happened like that. All of a sudden I'm like, oh my God. And Fountain.
The right tools of liberation, don't you?
We're even doing, in the last 3 weeks, I've even started doing Fountain boosts on here. Because every week I get 4 or 5 interesting boosts, and all of those things are making it click now. Fountain really clicks for me. I can, like I say, we're 30% listeners on Fountain, 30% on Spotify, and all the others are kind of Apple's next or whatever. But that's not bad, really. We're straight into a sort of a network of people on Fountain who like that kind of content. Sure, if we had a podcast about gardening, probably not going to score highly on Fountain yet, obviously. But it's all falling into place now. And as that happens, you can't help, elaborating in your mind, following a few of those pathways, and you start seeing, like you say, in the end, everyone will ask themselves the question: do I need censorship resistance in my my interconnections? I mean, Bitcoiners know this from the money side of things. I think we've jumped straight into the conversation here as well.
It's more people understanding that freedom of speech requires a free space where you have freedom of movement and association, which you don't have on some of these current platforms which exist. And like my, Twitter usage or whatever, I don't require censorship resistance. I just want to know what the algorithm's doing, and I want to have control over the algorithm. And those sorts of things are starting to happen in Nostr. Yeah, I was very critical on value for value, and Zaps too. I didn't like Zaps because I didn't like the way it was implemented. But both of those things happily have been proved very wrong. And having that extra thing a user or a consumer can do to say they like something, so they can like it, they can boost it, or now they can send value, and it's easy. It's click, done. You've sent a boost, and I think that as a tool, that's great for users, because everybody consumes content like, oh yeah, that really resonates with me. I like, but it's not enough. I want to do more. And then with payments, you can send whatever size payment you want to send. So if you really appreciate what the person said, then you can big fat tip and a boost. I
think though the really amazing side of that is millions and millions and millions of very small tips, because I think a lot of people, that's how they think. Because these days as well, there are lots of calls to action from people. If you're on the internet, you see them all the time. And after a while, you start thinking, well, am I really making a difference here? Should I do it? Or I need the money myself. But if you're sending like 10 cents or $1 a go, it's nothing. But if you've got a user group, if you've got 1 billion users and they're all sending 10 cents, that's a sizable amount of money. And I think that's what I always thought about value for value. And it didn't seem to be working when I first looked at Fountain, because I thought there's never going to be enough users to make this work. No. And even now, I mean, it's already, we had an episode 3 episodes ago, which got 40,000 sats, right? Which I'm so chuffed about. Yeah, I know it's only like whatever, 20 quid or whatever,
Yeah, but that's more than you would probably get just putting on YouTube or something.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But the dream for podcasts is not having sponsors, I think. I mean, not necessarily the dream, but I think if you really want to be moral about the way you create content, you want it to be funded by the people who are listening to you. And rather than somebody who really is just paying you to shill their product. So, and now I actually do think it'll happen. And I think the main reason is because the user experience is good enough that you can actually tell your friends about it.
Yeah,
and say, great. Get on it.
Yeah.
You know,
and then they're impressed. They go and go, "Wow, this is great. It works."
Yeah, 100%. Look, we've jumped straight into this conversation. I think probably I'll preface it obviously with an intro, but I think we better go back to basics on Nostr. Can I ask you personally yourself though? Because I don't think I've ever really known this. What, if you track it back far enough, what was your involvement actually in Nostr?
So, Jeff told me about Nostr, and there was only about 10 of us in the Telegram group at the time. And previously, before that, me and Jeff had worked on. When we made LNBits, one of the example.
You better explain what LNBits is.
So LNBits is a wallet account system for your node. It's like you can have a wallet or account for you run your own wallet, or you can run it for other people as well, or run it for the whole world if you want to, or your friends, family, whatever. So you can do the Uncle Jim model, but it also has these extensions. So it came out of like the maker community in Bitcoin and Lightning at that time, and it was useful to have a platform where you could have an idea, like you want to make a jukebox, connected to your Spotify and then accept payments for playing songs. And there was all these like great little projects out there, but you had to go to their own repos and then install them and blah, blah, blah. So there was always this idea of just having like a simple wallet account system and then make it easily extendable. So easy to build an extension and then show off that functionality which you want to build and play around with and experiment with. And then ultimately maybe even sell those extensions, which we're at now, which is very cool. So one of the extensions I made, because I was interested in, like P2P markets where less of the value is taken from a centralized body. And it was that idea of using public key crypto and then having your products. It's called, the extension was called Diagon Alley. You would have your products and then you could sign those products and push it to what we called an indexer at that time. And the indexer would just list those products. And then for whatever reason, that indexer went away. You can still prove that you're you and they're your products, and the customer can still prove that they're them. So me and Jeff worked on that one together for a little while, and turned into something of a protocol. So when Nostr came along, I saw kind of a bit of lineage from Diagon Alley, and I was like, is this related? He said, yes, it is. And so I was instantly hooked. I was like, wow, cool. This is like a generalized version of Diagon Alley. And now we can not only build a marketplace on it, but you can build social media and all social networks and whatever else. So at that time, there was a bunch of quite hacky developer looking clients for just creating notes. So I cloned Twitter, like the UI, using a framework called Quasar, and made the first kind of Twitter looking client, Nostr client. So that was like kind of the first Twitter client, I guess.
What was it called? Did it have a name?
It was just called the Nostr Twitter, I think.
Right.
I put it on Nostr.com, so I got Nostr.com for it at the time. And then that later became Brandly. Jeff forked. We had an argument because I was looking at Twitter, and actually the thirds in which Twitter's kind of split up in the UI, they're really odd ratios. And I was imagining all these focus groups to find those odd ratios. So I had it in Nostr Twitter with those ratios, and then Jeff just made it thirds. And I was like, so actually, because at that time I was relatively new to committing, so I didn't realize what a faux pas this was. But I just reverted his commit, and then he was like, right, so we forked off, and then he turned into Brandly. But I was busy with LNBits, so it was like, yeah, whatever. And then I couldn't really, because I was spending a lot of time on LNBits, so I couldn't really do any more Nostr stuff. And I kind of done my bit, at the beginning, and with the relationship with Diagon Alley as well. So I just spent all my time telling people about it. And I did the first talk on Nostr at HCCP in Prague, in the Parallelipolis. And so I did the first talk on Nostr there. And then every time, something would happen, like with Nostr Twitter, you would get like another 20 people join the Telegram group, and then you did the HCCP talk and you get another 40 people. And then people like Will came on board and he made Damus, then you get another 100 people come in. And then when Jack Dorsey came in, it was just like, boom, the floodgates opened and you had thousands of people kind of coming into the Nostr stuff. So that was the relationship with it. I think at the time, I think like anybody who finds Nostr and understands the protocol side, you just get very excited about it. You're like, wow, this can replace a lot of things. So I think the third issue, which I posted on the Nostr protocol GitHub, was the idea of a decentralized Uber, for example. So you just have geolocation as a type, and then you create a note, say I'm here, I'm a taxi. You say, oh, I'm here, I want a taxi, and then it suggests me, and then you just, ask if I'm available. I say I'm available, but this all happens through a UI, and then you could replace Uber with that, and anybody could become a taxi. But it's all heavily based on reputation. So reputation is kind of the missing piece of the puzzle. But what's great about it, now you've got this permissionless development environment, and now we've built Nostr Market, and then things like the Nostr Uber are possible. Then and even with, podcasting or whatever else, like, it will make it so much more valuable if we have a good reputation system built into it. So there's a lot of good computer science being done now on finding and creating a decentralized reputation system. And it might be like a mix and match. Maybe some AI, which just like looks through posts and says, yeah, Timothy's a real person. It could also be like a web of trust, but that's not really been tested so much, but some people are playing around with web of trust. And then the other option is one of the developers who works on LNBits, Vladstan. He came up with a proposal for something like open timestamps, but with a reputation. So you have a Merkle tree in a Bitcoin blockchain, in a transaction, and then you pay to be part of that tree. And then the more you pay, the higher up the tree you are. So you could leave a good or bad reputation and pay. So there's a cost to leaving a reputation. Because the big thing with a decentralized reputation system is it's going to get spammed and sock puppets. So if there's a cost to leaving reputation, that's less likely. So it may be a collection probably of all those things, which ends up becoming what we have as a reputation system.
Because I already saw a version of that when I was downloading apps through the Zap Store. And when you go on the Zap Store, if you click on an app, it shows you who else has downloaded that app. That's a form of reputation because they're all people I know.
Yeah,
from
totally. Yeah, so you have like, I don't know what you call it, like soft reputation, I suppose, but just people who you know, and that's their public key. And yeah, so I guess Web of Trust is kind of expanding that to make it a little bit more automated. But the real problem would be if I'm getting a taxi and I don't know the person who's giving me the cab ride.
Right, yeah.
In lots of ways, you build up a reputation. So like if you look at local Bitcoins early on, what they would suggest is when you first meet a seller of Bitcoin to buy some Bitcoin from them, they would say, we'll do a small amount, build up a real world relationship with the seller over time. And then, when you trust them, start buying bigger amounts from them. So I think there's an element of that as well. It's another kind of soft version of reputation, but you would need a form of reputation where I can buy something from somebody on the other side of the world. And then I have a bunch of indicators which say that this person is probably trustworthy. This is just going to steal my money.
It just occurred to me, actually, Vexel in Czech Republic. Vexel.
Yeah.
The app.
Yeah.
They should incorporate Nostr into that.
Yeah.
Because that's the marketplace that's done on social reputation, and it began as a place to buy and sell Bitcoin, and now it's just a marketplace for everything, really, including jobs, time, skills, all kinds of stuff. I was just thinking about
it's just making the tools, the implementation. Yeah, but totally, yeah, like it makes sense. It's like
everything should.
Yeah, well, you're not. It's not. It's so sometimes you're like, oh, you should implement Bitcoin into some computer game, and it doesn't really make sense for the developers, like to put themselves in kind of harm's way. Like if you're Grand Theft, if you're Rockstar, the company, and you've got Grand Theft Auto, and people want you to implement Bitcoin payments into or something, so you can buy and sell items in game items or something like that, then there's not really that much of an incentive for the company to do, or Fortnite, they try to implement Bitcoin. There's not really that much of an incentive to do it. But where it comes to a lot of implementing Nostr, what you're implementing really is just you're allowing your users to have public key cryptography and then communicate with each other and share stuff, which is only a good thing.
Do you think the defining characteristic of it then in the future is going to be identity? Do you think that's what it's going to be?
No, but I think it's just very useful. It means we can build a lot more stuff. You can use the marketplace now, and you could just buy something from somebody, and if they don't send you the thing, then never buy anything off them ever again and talk shit about them. But it would just make a lot of those other things you can build on Nostr that more, reliable, I guess. like the Uber thing, for example. So it would just make, it's kind of the missing piece of the puzzle for a whole bunch of other stuff which we want to build on top of Nostr. Like reputation is very important on the internet, isn't it? Like knowing the person you're engaged with is a real person and they're not going to rip you off and blah, blah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to predict, I'm trying to work, because it took me a while to work out what it was again. It's one of those things, because originally I just thought, it's a decentralized social network. But now I'm using different apps, serving different purposes with it. It makes me think that the core attribute of it, which is useful, is decentralized identity. The identity that you can take with you.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Do you think that's do you think that's the core kind of, not use case, because it underlies everything, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think if you think about Nostr, Nostr's really just a paradigm shift of smart clients, dumb servers with the relays. And then it's like, okay, what can you build with it? And then what do we need to build the things? So one of the ingredients which we need for building a bunch of things is a decent decentralized reputation system. But sometimes when you're like, oh, you could, because we do IoT stuff on Nostr.
What's that?
Internet of things. So turning things on and off in your house. That's the thing we've been playing with.
Yes.
And Black Coffee's doing a load of good work on that. And one of the developers who works on LNBits stuff. Yeah. And there's something very rewarding for me using just a simple dumb client and then turning some, I'm saying a dumb client, but it's smarter than the relay, which is relaying the information. But I just press a button and it turns the light on in my home. And I know that thing isn't snooping. It's just a WebSocket connected to a relay. It's not snooping on my local area network. It's not snooping traffic. There's not like crazy Orwellian terms and conditions in the app, which I've downloaded for it. And that's like a really useful thing, which doesn't exist. Like there are good free and open source IoT solutions like MQTT, but it involves running a server, opening ports, doing this and that. But this is just like, you just get it. It would be like getting any other IoT thing. You get it. There's a QR code. You scan it. You connect to it. You put in your Wi-Fi details. Boom. Now you can turn things on and off, or you can, get it to read out something like how full your batteries are, or whatever, for your solar panels or whatever. And then you're like, well, aren't you trying to push this Nostr thing into an area which doesn't make sense? And it's like, no, because really Nostr is just smart clients, dumb servers, just relays. You got relays, public key cryptography, and some WebSockets, and that's it. And then it's like, what can we build with that? And then, oh yeah, okay, well in that case, IoT makes sense. You're just relaying data like on, off, and what's the readout of the solar panel batteries or whatever. So then when you just think of it as a protocol, as a paradigm shift, then it's like, well, yeah, a lot of stuff you can replace with Nostr. And it's kind of cool. It's interesting because early on in Bitcoin, there was these, those Andreas Antonopoulos talks where he would talk about decentralized Uber and decentralize this and decentralize that. And I think that people inherently knew that within the basket of tools which Bitcoin is built upon, such as public key cryptography, that you could decentralize a bunch of stuff. But there was this conflation with the idea of running a blockchain. But ultimately, it's like, no, you can build those things. You don't need the blockchain. You just need public key cryptography and a way of like transferring data from one person to another. So yeah, it's interesting that people kind of had like an instinct that those things would be possible to be built with the tools, with the the collection of tools, but they conflated it with the blockchain thing. And now we're like, okay, we don't need the shitcoins. We can actually just build the things.
It's funny you mentioned that because this week I came back in contact with a part of my past, my dark past. Do you remember a blockchain called Steam?
No.
Oh God. It was, I forget the name of the guy that started it, but anyway, I think it was 2018 or something. And they started a social network and on the Steam blockchain, and I joined it and I was posting on there and it was using their own token and stuff like this. But why it was eye-opening was because you could also then take that identity that you had and do this, like plug your keys into a completely different thing. And it's very similar to, obviously, without the blockchain, it's very similar to what Nostr's doing now. But yeah, I somebody was actually streaming this podcast through their own RSS feed.
Yeah.
And storing it on the Steam blockchain completely randomly.
Yeah.
I know. And I went to their website and I was trying to work out what was going on. And then I realized on my computer, I still had this private key that I could log in to the blockchain. And I saw all this stuff from like 7 or 8 years ago. But
Yeah,
it's very similar to the idea that now that's why I kind of home in on the identity thing with Nostr, because what I think with Nostr, it makes me realize that I can take this thing, this identity, and I can plug it into anything I want.
Oh yeah, and you can on the reputation front as well, like the reputation which you've built up on your social platform
Comes with you.
You could then use for buying and selling stuff if you
Exactly.
wanted to, or you could use for your taxi service or whatever. Yeah. So it's interoperable reputation.
Yeah, I know. I mean,
Something will probably end up running. So like Nostr.com sits in this kind of interesting place where you've got this censorship-resistant, I don't want to use the word decentralized, but censorship-resistant data sharing paradigm thing on the internet. And most of the work which is done is on removing kind of the trusted third-party part of it. But then, because Nostr.com is a very clear net website and centralized service, and we have a company, LNBits Inc., which runs it. It means that we're in the position where we can do some kind of boring clear net stuff. So one of the things we might end up doing is just having like a KYC relay where we plug into a third-party service, the relay plugs into a third-party service. You do all your KYC to say Timothy lives in the UK and he's a real person and whatever. With this, like the service exchanges use, they all use these third-party services. And then if you then log into a service, an exchange, casino, whatever, then they could query the relay. So as long as they have connect to the same relay, then they could query that relay and say, does he reside in the UK and is he over 18? And then the relay just says, yes, he is. You did his KYC, do it every 6 months. So we could run those sorts of services, which they're less sexy, but they're services which currently exist. And actually, what's kind of cool about it is that it makes, like, you have the public key cryptography attached to your KYC identity, which you can then use across platforms, and you can migrate to different platforms, and it's kind of less friction than if you were, having to KYC on every single separate platform, if that makes sense. So that's something which, is going to be interesting to build.
Do you think that states would ever adopt that? Do you think, large institutions and large, very, sort of legacy institutions, do you think they'd ever... Because, like, take Bitcoin.
Perhaps,
Bitcoin as an example.
Perhaps they would. I mean, perhaps they... Yeah, I mean, this is it's like free and open source software. In order to stay relevant, big corporate proprietary companies had to start implementing free and open source software. This is what I think about Bitcoin. So I imagine it's going to be a bloody revolution. I think that the legacy system will have have to implement this thing or become redundant. Yeah.
They've acknowledged it. Like there wasn't even much of a. I mean, obviously, I don't want to touch wood when I say it, but there wasn't much of a fighting stage in a sense.
No,
because it was acknowledgement. Okay, well, there's not a lot we can do about this.
No, too big to defeat, sort of
right.
thing. Yeah.
But so Nostr might be the same thing because it's based on the same principles. Yeah. So you could imagine that take the Welsh government, might say, right, okay, we're going to run a relay and it's going to be the official Welsh relay. Yeah. So we're going to ask everyone to send in their details and blah, blah. Is that the kind of thing that could happen?
I guess so. But I mean, the whole point of Nostr is freedom of association, isn't it? So I guess for your citizen, you live in a country and you have to do some legal shit because you live in that country and, you have to pay taxes and whatever else. Like, yeah, they could just implement. I mean, it's a very useful way of being able to associate your identity with public key cryptography. And I think we all appreciate that public key cryptography is the answer to a lot of the world's problems online. When you look at like unusable passwords and captures, which are too hard for humans to solve, and the rise of supercomputers.
Captures are getting out of control.
Yeah, they're getting out of control, and like it really is on the brink of it being too hard for a human to do. So then the world. I mean, if you think about it, zero sum, and it's good for us because as Bitcoiners, we're ahead of the curve. Like we've gotten used to this amazing technology, which is public key cryptography. And really, when you think about it, Bitcoin is like a side project of public key cryptography. Public key cryptography is arguably the revolution.
Right, yes.
And then Bitcoin is made possible by public key cryptography. And so is also something like Nostr. And the whole world will wake up to it and they will have to use it because it solves all those problems. And then they're going to have all the same key management headaches which we've had, but we're actively building solutions for in a whole bunch of different scenarios. So you have key management solutions for Bitcoin, but key management solutions for Bitcoin are very different to key management solutions for your social network profile. So like we built the first Nostr signing device, so you could have your private key on the little gizmo and then sign on the device and keep your NSEC on the device. And it's just a little microcontroller. You can check that out on shop.lnbits.com if anyone wants to go buy one. Or actually, you should probably just go to shop.lnbits.com and then go to the repo and then buy it yourself, because then you don't get the supply chain attack. So, but anyway, it's there. It's there as a reference point. But we built that and we're like, okay, cool. Now we've got a hardware wallet for NSECs, or a hardware signer for NSECs. But then it's kind of goofy. Like you don't want to have to carry this little dongle around with you and plug it into your laptop and plug it into your phone. Some people might want to do that. So more recently, the thing which we've been working on, again, Black Coffee's been doing a great job on this. That guy's on fire, man. Is it's like an NSEC bunker, but we're not calling it an NSEC bunker because that's Pablo's thing. So it's a small microcontroller which has a very dumb, cheap piece of hardware. It has your NSEC on, and then you take your social networking, client on your phone or whatever, has a delegate key on it. You sign a note. So you sign something, I'm here today in the Celtic Manor in Wales, having a great time with Timothy. I sign it. The NSEC bunker is connected at home. It's somewhere safe in my house, and it's connected to the internet. It's connected to a relay. It sees that note, pulls that note down, signs it with my actual key, and then publishes it. And then everyone who's following my actual key again gets that note. And that is a much more realistic solution when it comes to day-to-day, social networking on the internet, where you don't have to keep plugging a dongle in and out of your devices. You just have this thing at home, and as long as that's safe and secure, then it's got your keys on it. And if anyone's interested in buying one of those, you can get it from nostr.com. There's a pre-sale.
It's funny. I've never heard anyone say that the revolution was public key cryptography. I've always thought the internet was the revolution, and I think it probably is, because pre-internet there was no digital realm. You couldn't look at it, you couldn't touch it. Well, you can't touch it, but you couldn't access it. You can access it now, but within that place, which you would whatever you'd call it, the digital realm, public key cryptography is one of the foundational inventions, isn't it?
The internet wouldn't work because you wouldn't be able to do any banking. You wouldn't be able to buy anything if you didn't have encryption, and if you didn't have public key crypto. Every time you'd use HTTPS, you've got some public key cryptography stuff going on in the background. Like, what was it, the 70s, I think, when Will Duffy, or whatever his name is, when they came up with the public key crypto, a way of sharing a way of encrypting stuff without having to share a secret beforehand. And then that arguably made the internet, which we now have, possible. That and the work of, the cypherpunks and the crypto wars and all the shit they did to ensure that normal people could get access to encryption. So it's a big part of the internet. But yeah, it's kind of I suppose it's like it's kind of a soundbite that public key cryptography is the revolution.
But a lot of people, especially a lot of people I know, think Bitcoin's the revolution. But actually, it's probably not. It's one aspect of public key cryptography, which is money, isn't it?
Yeah, you can secure your money.
Yes, which is important, which is a massive revolution.
You couldn't do without public key cryptography.
Exactly. Yeah. So that may, I don't know. I often think, what would it be like to look back 100 years in the future? It would be very obvious to most people now, I think, that after the invention of the internet, there was complete chaos, which we're kind of living through now. It doesn't look like it here. It's lovely and quiet and peaceful, but when you go out into the world, you see a lot of potential chaos, and especially if you go on Twitter now, or on the internet, you see a hell of a lot of chaos. But it was around. It's like it's all deriving, I think, from this invention of the printing press, kind of this invention of the internet, the sharing of information. And what Nostr does is make the sharing of information free and open, which is kind of like, it's a fundamental. I mean, if you think about real life in comparison, real life, take any frontier, people go there and they're free and they want to be free, and then people start coming in and start making rules and regs and saying you can't go here and putting up borders and all this kind of stuff. The same thing happened in the digital realm, and we're at that point now where people are getting quite I mean, getting quite close to making the internet an inaccessible place. They've tried a lot of things, but I suppose Nostr's almost like the layer, the uncensored layer of the internet.
I honestly think it's returning the internet to the original promise of what the internet could be before it became co-opted by big corporations and centralized interests and small groups of people. Because the original idea of the internet was it was this information revolution where people could openly share information and freedom of press and all that sort of stuff. But then you ended up with these, just because it was kind of convenient and not many people could build the technical side of it, I suppose. So there was a few people who wielded the power of computer science, and there was proprietary control of it by companies in Silicon Valley, and then they became the big social networking companies, and they had that big gravity of users. Everyone kind of got sucked into it. So it's almost like there was a big bang, and you had these wonderful bits of forums and whatever else flying around in the internet space, and then they all start to clump together and turn into these big, massive, centralized systems. And their gravity just kind of pulled things, but they're privately owned, clumps. Whereas now it's again like we're using permissions development and then using public key cryptography, returning the internet to what it was initially promised to be, which is freedom of association, freedom of movement, freedom of speech, and I think it fills me full of hope. And I think that's the coolest thing about the and we're lucky enough to be working on this collection of technologies, which often fills us with hope, like Bitcoin, where we think, well, actually, this thing isn't just some dorky, niche interest we're all interested in, and we're all deluded, and it's never going to have any positive impact on humanity. Like, the reality is that the tools will have a positive impact on humanity, and we're lucky enough to have seen that and be able to actively play a part in fostering adoption and educating people, and then also being on that frontier of having this new tool and being able to build new stuff. Like, we can just build something,
and at home as well. Like, literally, tinkering. You don't need masses of servers and costing trillions of dollars.
I told you earlier on, so the reason I was a bit late, I was driving from seeing Ben Weeks. I won't dox him saying where he is, but I was seeing Ben Weeks on the other side of the country, and it's about a 4-hour drive. And we spent last night and this morning making the new tutorial for the FOSSA, which is the free and open source Bitcoin ATM. It's so cool. The new version of it's so cool. So we were doing a video tutorial for that, and I got Ben in the video tutorial because it's a free and open source project, and he's done a lot of work on it. Black Coffee's done a lot of work on it. DNI Labs has done a lot of work on it as well. So I wanted to show, so I've got all those people involved in the video tutorial this time. So it's not just like me, because usually these things, it's me and then a bunch of other people developing it, but then I'm the one who does a video tutorial and everyone thinks I've done all the work, and I don't like that. So anyway, but developing an ATM, how many people can, in the legacy world, develop their own ATM, build their own ATM on Visa Network or whatever? It would be impossible. You'd have to get licenses and permission and whatever else. And we're just buying some hardware, and from some cheap hardware, smashing it together and making this little free and open source ATM. Anyone can build on top of and fork and, adapt and change. And it's almost like the enthusiasm from developers and users you get at something like a Bitcoin conference. Imagine what a Visa Network conference is like.
I know.
It must. I mean, we should probably go to one just to check it out. But I imagine,
do they even have them?
Probably. But I mean, I imagine there's loads of people in suits, and they're all sad and miserable. There's probably a few techies who are excited about something they built, but they're underappreciated. And it'd be boring. It'd be so boring. But this is why we win, because they can't compete with the overriding incentive in all humans for greater liberty and en masse. That incentive is so much more powerful. It dwarfs the incentive of centralized players trying to control stuff. And it's a much more powerful force.
It's funny. The first time I met you, it was a Bitcoin Cardiff, a Welsh Bitcoin event where you had a lightning,
the POS thing.
Yeah, and cool. I remember thinking, "What the hell is this?" And then the time after that was.
But that's the first. This is the cool thing. I'm a very novice developer, and at that time I'd made the first Bitcoin Lightning point of sale and demoed it in Cardiff, and that was the place where the first ever Lightning Bitcoin point of sale was demoed. That's cool.
But but then probably about three years later, I made one in Amsterdam. Do you remember you did that little workshop in Amsterdam?
Yeah.
I've still got it.
Yeah.
It was like it was a 3D printed case, and inside was some
the little
bits and
gizmo.
bobs. Yeah.
Yeah, slowly over time it's evolved. I love seeing those projects evolve. Yeah.
What's the plan with the ATM then in the end? Is it ever going to be a sort of like a business, or?
It's just making it easy. So we have the for-profit arm of LNBits Inc., which then supports development on LNBits. So that's the mission statement of the LNBits Inc. is generate revenue to employ developers to make LNBits better. Because sometimes it's like boring work which needs to happen on LNBits, and it's hard to kind of get you free and open source developers to do it. Whereas if we're being paid to do it, and I mean, to be honest, that's a lie. Some free and open source developers will happily work on that sort of stuff. But it just kind of bootstraps the project, but then it's beholden to the free and open source project. So we were talking earlier about Nostr.com. You have your NIP5 profile of Nostr.com. And, that's a service which we've built on Nostr.com for people, but it's using the NIP05 extension in LNBits. And by creating that service, it meant that we gave a hell of a lot of TLC to the NIP05 extension, which I think, can't remember who initially made it. God, I feel bad for that. But anyway, whoever initially made that extension, it just sat there and hadn't done anything, hadn't been developed for, a couple of years. And then over the past 6 months, we've made this thing production ready because we ourselves are using it for a product, for selling NIP05s on Nostr.com. And where was I going with this? All right, so we also have the hardware on the shop, the LNBits shop, and we have an incentive to create hardware which people want to buy. So we're sort of marketing it a prosumer Bitcoiner, I guess. You can, if you want, you can just buy the parts and build it yourself. It's completely free and open source. We make it really easy to build. Or you could go on the shop and then buy one, I don't know, $900 or something. You can buy one of these little things. But we've got it to the point where it's honestly like Lego. It's so easy to put together. We have a web installer. So you just get if you're putting it, if you buy the kit for it, you've got 3 wires you need to plug in. And then you've got, the bill acceptor, coin acceptor, printer if you're using a printer. Black Coffee made a board for it, fabricated a board for it, and then and the screen as well. And then it's just click, click, click. You just plug in these wires and then put it together. And then you have, your USB cable, you plug it into your laptop, you install the firmware from your laptop from a browser, and then you configure it from the browser as well. It's as easy as as making Lego. And that's cool because then there's more people will create these things, and that helps drive adoption. But the huge update to the FOSSA, the ATM, is that now before it generates an LNURL. So it's offline for one. It generates an LNURL withdrawal with a unique hash in, which the server can then verify that that's a unique hash, hasn't been used before, and then it can give you the money. When you scan the LNURL withdraw, that's how it can be offline. But now it has a prefix on the LNURL withdraw. So if you scan it with a regular normal QR code scanner, it's a URL basically, a URL with the LNURL afterwards. And when you click on it, it takes you to a page. And in that page, you can withdraw the money using a Lightning address. So it's arguably Nostr ready, an invoice, a Lightning invoice, or you can withdraw on-chain or withdraw liquid as well. And the way we do it is we use Bolt's trustless atomic swaps. So on your LNBits install, you have the Bolt's extension. All you need to do is enable the Bolt's extension, LN devices when you set up the ATM. Click a little toggle which says allow liquid and on-chain withdrawals. So all you have on the thing which is funding your ATM is Lightning. You just have a Lightning node or a custodial Lightning wallet, whatever. That's the thing funding your LNBits. But then when somebody withdraws on-chain, at that point, it does a trustless atomic swap using Bolts. They get the on-chain. You basically send Bolts the Lightning amount, and then Bolts then pays them the on-chain or the liquid amount. But it's very cool because it's the first time where you have a Bitcoin ATM where you don't need to have an on-chain hot wallet or a liquid hot wallet or whatever. And those things are incredibly annoying to manage if you're running an ATM service, having a hot wallet. And because it's LNBits, you can just have in your, the wallet, you could just have £1,000 worth of Bitcoin on Lightning. And that's the reserve which your ATM uses. So you just got one thing you need to keep an eye on, one balance you need to keep an eye on. It's very cool. Is
there any opportunity to license this to an actual Bitcoin ATM company, or do they not care?
I don't think it's licensing it to it,
or whatever, like selling it. Or
I imagine that, because I mean, we joke about this a lot in LNBits, that we do a lot of the R&D and then other people profit on it.
Yeah,
because I imagine some of the ATM companies will use Bolt's trustless atomic swaps to do on-chain payouts because it's a really good idea. But I think for us, like the ATM itself, it's so fun. And it's at a nice price point, and we're just going to have, I think there's a whole bunch of like prosumer Bitcoiners, where the Bitcoiners, they've done well on their stack, they want to buy some gizmos, maybe they've got a cafe or a bar and they want to put a Bitcoin, little ATM in there. I was thinking about actually, you could run a little scam in that you say to people, okay, if you pay with Bitcoin, you get 10% off. And they're like, oh, I haven't got any Bitcoin. And you're like, okay, well, I've got an ATM over there. And then when they go to the ATM, you charge them 15%. So actually, you make 5%, but they think that they're getting 10% off, and you're just sort of ripping them off. But
so, I mean, I think you're, as far as people buying them, yeah. But do you know what else they're really good at? They're a great teaching tool.
Yeah, totally.
Are they still quite small? Because the last time I used one, it was
this is beautiful. I mean, so Ben, he created the case for it, and he created, because he's got like a regular normal 3D print. He 3D printed the case. And he's got a regular normal 3D printer with a normal 3D printer bed on it. So this box fits that bed, minus a few millimeters. So we're restricted by that design envelope, I guess. This version doesn't have the printer in because it's too small. But yeah, it makes it really neat and compact. And because it's offline, it's got a battery as well. You could just stick it on the wall there, and just leave it and see if anyone buys any Bitcoin with it.
Well, the cool thing is you can feed notes and stuff into it. And Bitcoin comes out.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
on-chain Liquid or Lightning. And I tell you what, more and more, I'm loving Liquid because it's so quick and fast. And there's this sort of in between, between on-chain and Lightning kind of interoperable layer. If you withdraw in Liquid, it's like, it takes like 30 seconds for you to get the Liquid amount. And it's, you wouldn't want to put vast sums in there, maybe. You want to, people do, but you wouldn't want to put vast. I wouldn't want to put vast sums. I'd keep my vast sums on chain if I had vast sums, and then you pop, your spends on Lightning, and then there's something in between in Liquid. So
something you just mentioned that I want to explain was NIP 05, which, and I think this is something, this little bit of alpha, a little bit of information that people might actually like to know. Is that you can buy a NIP 05, like, is it an identifier? Would you call it that?
Yeah,
kind of like, yeah, right. And I think they're a little bit like domain names of the past.
Yeah,
and they're all available now. Your ones are, and the only reason I say your ones are the best is because you've got Nostr.com.
Yeah.
So you can get your name at Nostr.com and it will be your identifier.
Yeah. And I mean, you could do it yourself on your own domain name if you want to, like in a NIP05. And that's why working on the extension is cool, because other people could do that if they want to. But as a sort of like NIP05 service, Nostr.com being like a professional service, which is run by LNBits Inc., it means that you kind of get a bit of a professional kind of, product. So you buy the NIP05. Actually, we're going to make an affiliate link, I guess it's called. So in the if anyone buys a NIP05 on Nostr.com and they use the name Timothy, they'll get 20% off.
They can't.
Why?
I've got it.
No. They use the discount code Timothy.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks.
They get 20% off.
All right,
and then you get some of that too.
No, but it is interesting because if what a lot of people are saying is true, which is that billions will onboard, and the name sticks, which it is. Nostr is the name. Yeah. Nostr's about to change. It's like being able to buy. I think my NIP. I got Timothy, and it was $5.
Yeah.
So
and we're building services in as well. So like one of the services we've added is you can also use that as an LN address, and then you can use it as your LN address for Zaps. But then we're also adding. I'm just going to talk about it.
This is going to go out in 2 weeks, or it might even be next Friday, actually.
All right, we can talk about it then. But we've got an extension in LNBits called LN Calendar, which is like Calendly, except people can pay sats to book you for slots. We've built that, Tal, who works in LNBits, and Vladstan have built this. And so in my Nostr my.nostr.com, when you have your NIPO 5, you just then get this new service, which is LN Calendar. It's like Calendly, and you can sell spaces for appointments. So we're just going to like basically just build in a bunch of the tools, so a bunch of the extensions and things we have in LNBits, by then creating them as like products on Nostr.com. It gives us an excuse to work on the extensions and make the extensions better. And then anyone can, offer a similar service if they want to using the extension. So it's like there's a balance between, this is the company being beholden to the free and open source community. As long as we're doing that, we stand in good stead with the free and open source community. As soon as we, try to do anything bad, then the free and open source community would kill us and, fork off. And that'd be the end of us. But no, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun, and it's it means that we can generate some revenue to work on all these technologies. We really like the NSEC bunker thing. I don't even know what we're calling it. I think we're calling it the NSEC signer, hardware NSEC signer, or something like that. And it means that we can contribute back to LNBits. Key signer, something like that. We don't want to call it NSEC. I wanted to call it NSEC bunker, but Black Coffee didn't, because he said it was Pablo.
Well, that doesn't. Fair. It doesn't make me think about what it is.
This is actually key signer is really. So we were actually thinking in LNBits that we could use the same signer, so we could have a funding source, and then the signer is actually the thing. It's a bit like voltage, I suppose. So you would have the keys on the signer at home, and then your LNBits will work with the funding source while it's connected to the thing with the keys. But then if you disconnect it, it'll turn off and it'll disconnect. So I thought that would be a cool way to for people to have to trust servers less with key management stuff. So a key signer, we could also use it for other things other than NSECs. Sorry.
Do you ever worry that, especially since you're connected to Nostr.com and do you ever worry that, there's a lot of this going around at the moment, Samurai, I'm thinking about. Do you wonder that someone's going to come and see you as a point of attack on the network?
No, so the thing is about Nostr is, obviously people get put in prison who they shouldn't be put in prison, but the thing is about Nostr is a Nostr client is a browser, and it's populated with the data which you pull by the keys in which you're connecting to, the relays in which you connect to. So it's really just a browser. Like it's like it's as dumb as a browser. So, you're going to go after Firefox because on Firefox you can go and look at some crazy content which you shouldn't be able to look at. Like, that's how Nostr clients work. They don't come with data inside of them. So this is, it's a bit like, there's always a double-edged sword on freedom technologies. So if you think about, for me, peer-to-peer marketplaces, I want to do that because I'm a bit of a lefty. I like the idea of co-ops, and I don't want Jeff Bezos to exist, right? However, it also makes a really good dark market. And then someone could arguably come after me and say, you're making dark market software. And I'm like, no, I'm making software for people to buy and sell things with each other without this corporate interest, which is sucking up all this value from, I think it's a much more efficient way of buying and selling stuff. And if you look at something like Amazon, you think that's the most efficient way you're going to buy and sell things. I don't think it is. I think we're not at the end of history. I think we can do better, where the producer of the thing gets more of the value, or the purchaser has to pay less, because you haven't got the Jeff Bezos part where, he's becoming the world's first trillionaire. Like, clearly that's not the most efficient system. So, but it's always a double-edged sword, and then arguably a lot of these technologies could be used for nefarious things. I think where Samurai came unstuck is they were like actively marketing to criminals. They were saying criminals use our service, like in published, printed public, advertising or whatever. Or they made mention to the fact that criminals use their service, and I think they wholly underestimated how how easy it was to attack the Samurai service.
What did they finally get the Silk Road on, though?
Well, this is it. It's a centralized service, isn't it? So you can. There's a what's his name? There's a Ross Ulbricht, who you can find and attack and take out. But you can't take out Nostr Market, because someone will just spin up another. All the Market client is like a dumb browser for browsing products, but it's populated by the products. We maintain a list of vanilla public keys just selling some Bitcoin stuff. So if you go on market.nostr.com and then you import the sort of demo list, then you'll see it'll populate full of a bunch of products. But other people could maintain a list with more nefarious products, But then it's the job of the legal system to pursue those people who are selling things they shouldn't be selling.
I was just thinking about the Pirate Bay. Look at what's happened to the Pirate Bay over the years.
But it's still there.
It is being spun up, I know, but people connected with it are being tarnished as criminals, right?
Yeah.
That's the slight problem. Because
but then that comes down to the power which the FCC, the power they wield on copyright. The Hollywood and all this. So there's a big money there, and they
But that's arguably going to happen on your market.
Yeah,
there'll be people selling software on there. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. You're right. Like
it's a browser. It's just a browser.
I know.
That's what I'm going to say in court. It's a browser. I mean, my jail cell. I'd be like, I just made a browser. That's all I made was a browser. I mean, so Pirate Bays are good. So originally with Diagon Alley, the Pirate Bay was the model. I was like, it's just resilient. You can't take it out because people can just spin this thing up. And with Diagon Alley, you can just spin it up. You can just spin up a new index, spin up the merchant software, or whatever, for them to manage their products on. So it was kind of off that model that I was looking at, but yeah, I sleep okay,
I know. Well, you're on.
I don't encourage any bad behaviour.
I don't think anyone working for the good of liberty, broadly speaking, I think you sleep well because you couldn't be doing anything else anyway. So you may as well do the thing that you believe in. And but I know from many historical examples that the two systems don't like each other, and one of them often reverts to force to enforce its beliefs. And unfortunately, I mean, that's why I was asking if you ever thought that the national governments or the states might adopt this technology, because I've watched that this happen to Bitcoin. In the beginning, it was quite subversive, because every form of sort of independent currency previous to that had been quashed and very quickly. And a lot of the memes 10 years ago were, the government's going to shut it down, and people said, well, they can't. And you think, well, they probably can. I don't know how, but they probably can. And now the biggest institutions in the world have adopted it already in 15 years. And looking at Nostr, you see similar attributes. I was going to say, is it even more far-reaching? I don't know. Money's pretty far-reaching with Bitcoin, but they may need to adopt it. They may look at it and go, well, look, it's free and open source, and it's free. There's freedom raging in there. But if we create our own relay or our own bit of software with our own algorithms, then at least we can kind of keep people in there, make a like a walled garden on the protocol.
I guess it would be like, I suppose the power of law and state could say you can only access these relays on your client because they have moderation and filter policies to filter out illegal stuff. Yeah, but I suppose that's like, if you like the terms and conditions of a browser, if you install it, it says you don't use it for XYZ. But then people do use it for XYZ, and then it's up to the police to go after them, So yeah, I mean, they that probably would happen, I guess, if like a nation embraced Nostr. And I think that's what happens with, Amethyst when you install it. There's a whole bunch of relays on there which have got like filtering and moderation policies. So I've never seen anything horrible on Nostr. Thank God, because I'm very squeamish. But I've seen more horrible things on Twitter. I've seen like people being killed on Twitter. I've never seen any of that sort of stuff on Nostr. That's
really ramped up recently, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. Yeah.
Like, if I get sucked into a video sort of scroll on Twitter, it's amazing how quickly it goes to violence. Yeah. And I don't know why that is, because the first time I watched it, obviously I was intrigued.
Engagement and stuff.
Yeah. But I deliberately flick fast now because I'm trying to affect the algorithm somehow.
Yeah.
But it's a strange thing to behold. It's not like I necessarily loved Twitter before Elon, because I think there was a lot of censorship going on, and it was annoying. It was a bit annoying before him, but now something is working in the algorithm. Maybe it's the incentive model that's trying to get you to stay on there, because now you pay a fee for this, that, and the other. I don't know, But yeah, it's not. I mean, I'm happy for Nostr for that exact reason. I like going on Amethyst. It's really good fun. Everyone says hello,
good morning
to you every morning. It is nice. Something actually, I interviewed. I won't say his real name. Self-banked, Self-banked, the other day, and he said, "Ask Ben about end-to-end encryption on Nostr. Someone's making a Telegram clone, because I didn't realize that there's a billion users on Telegram. Is that right?
Yeah, there's a billion users on Telegram. Yeah, and I live on Telegram. Like all our groups are on Telegram.
But presumably, did you, when you started on Telegram, did you think it wasn't a very secure platform, or did you not care?
I don't really care, because it's kind of public spaces. Like, it's our public, LNBits chat, for example. So I don't really care. But so Telegram's, I mean, it's an incredible UI experience. That's why people like it. That's why I like it. You can build bots for it. It's great. And I think that's why it pulls in so many users. But all the stuff which has been happening more recently with Telegram, where the creator of Telegram is like being indicted and whatever else, people are realizing that maybe it won't exist forever. And then maybe all that data could be sifted through by whoever. And it would be quite nice to have a Nostr version of Telegram. So Jeff G, a very talented developer, he's working, so he's adding, I think it's called MLS. It's an encryption scheme which is in, I think it's HTTP it's in the the specs, the HTTP specs, but it's a new encryption protocol. I mean, I'm probably bastardizing this because I haven't officially kind of read through it all, but with that encryption protocol, it's higher grade encryption than Signal. And he's building a Telegram client. And I've spoken to him, and I'm just been like, dude, please make it as close to Telegram as possible. Don't try and be clever. Just clone Telegram, because that's the thing we all love living on. And then make it relatively easy to import or export our users across to it. And if that existed, and if there was an easy way to kind of export users across, and if it just looked and felt like Telegram, then people will use it. It'll pull in, a good number of those billion people. But no, it's an incredible amount of people, isn't it? 1 billion people using that platform.
I did think it was a little bit. I thought it was a bit of I mean, Signal.
It's 1 billion active users.
Yeah. So
it's not even like just registered users. It's the go-to for a lot of people for their chat app. And I really think because of the UI. The UI is good. Like, it's better than WhatsApp. On WhatsApp, you don't see as much of the feed or what. There's something about it, like the font size. But also Telegram,
if you compare it to WhatsApp, Telegram has this public persona of being somewhat encrypted and edgy,
which is weird because it's not.
Well, yeah, but I didn't know that until recently.
Yeah.
I honestly never thought about that. And
you would assume it is because WhatsApp, even WhatsApp is encrypted, yeah.
But you would also assume it because of so many techie people use Telegram. I mean, not so much now, and there's so many other options, but there's always a Telegram group for pretty much everything.
Oh yeah, and the first thing I do if I've made a new project, I'll make a Telegram group for it, and then that's a nice place for everyone to kind of center around, share ideas.
And how long do you think it will be before there's an encrypted Nostr Telegram clone? Then
I mean, Jeff G's working hard, and the expectations, partly thanks to me, are really high because I've been telling everyone about it and how amazing it's going to be. But he's a one-man army. I don't know if he's on Geyser. If he is, then just chuck him some sats, help him along. The project, I think, is on a repo, and contributors are probably welcome. I don't think he's like officially launched it, but I think you can download it and try. I haven't even downloaded it and tried to run it yet because I'm waiting for Jeff G to say now it is ready. And then when he says now it's ready, we're going to shill the shit out of that because it's.
Can you monetize it? Use it? Can it be a business? Because a lot of FOSS applications and things like this rely on the good-heartedness of people. And
I mean, so I think I like this is interesting actually, because I was very lefty, or I've always been very traditionally lefty, always hated capitalism and all that sort of stuff, kind of naively. And then being in Bitcoin, obviously you're rubbing shoulders with all these ANCAPs and Austrian economists, and and then you think, well, these people aren't evil, and there's some, what are they defending? What are they actually defending? And it's the people's right to have private property, private ownership of a production. But then what they're thinking of in their heads is a local industrialist who's bringing up the lives of the people around them. they're not thinking of the evil corporation, evil international corporation, which is just sucking all the resources and is incentivized not to care about the planet and all this sort of stuff. Some of them are maybe they defend, but they bunch it all together and they defend it all within the same breath. Whereas I feel that private capital and the pursuit of profit, if it's beholden to a local community, so if the person who's like this where we are now at the Celtic Manor in Wales, it's Terry Williams built this. He's Wales's first self-made billionaire. And he has a vested interest in improving the lives of the people in Wales. And the other project he's working on is a Swansea Lagoon project, which is a renewable lagoon project in Swansea where I live. And but he's local and he wants to improve the lives of these people and improve Wales as well. So there's definitely like an incentive from the pursuit of capital to improve the lives. But I think in free and open source, you almost get that. So if you think about Bitcoin, historically, when companies colluded together and tried to subvert Bitcoin and take control of the protocol, which is all the block war stuff, the block size wars, then it got this huge bitch slap, didn't it, for doing it from the community. So they're beholden to the community of users. So I think you have that in sort of free and open source and in protocols, and you have it kind of in Nostr as well. That you can operate private capital, but you can't try and monopolize the thing. You can't try and take all the resources. I mean, it's a commons. Like everyone's got to nurture the commons. Whatever you're doing, just make sure it benefits everybody. Well, it benefits, it nurtures the commons. It doesn't try to own the whole thing as a whole. And then you end up with this really, I just think of like a nicer, purer form of private capital where it has some responsibility to its users. So when it comes to free and open source software, I think it's the future when it comes for private capital. So like that model of having a thriving free and open source community, which then the for-profit arm depends upon and is beholden to and has to nurture. I think that's the future model for private capital. I think they're both going to exist. But it's almost like, we're doing it with Twitter, aren't we? We're acknowledging that what Twitter is probably shouldn't be owned by a corporation, a company, and a dude. It probably should be a commons which everyone can have free access to and build on top of, and you have permissionless development and whatever else. But you can also build businesses on top of it as well. So there is, with free and open source, obviously you don't have proprietary control of it, so you can't just license it and sell it. But then you do have like hundreds of thousands of hours of free development time. Like if we were to try and develop LNBits from scratch and pay for it to be built, it's a very expensive piece of software to build. It'd be like millions of dollars or something to build that piece of software. Whereas we haven't spent millions of dollars on it. It now exists, and we can build services on top of it and sell those services, and then feedback, and then create that feedback loop to the free and open source.
It's funny that we have a similar version of that in the Free Cities movement, which is basically states or governments treating people in their countries as customers.
Yeah.
I mean, it's roughly the same thing. Your customers are keeping you in check in a way that your open source community, if you start overstepping the mark, they're going to take what you've got and just recreate it somewhere else.
Go somewhere else.
And the Free Cities theory is roughly the same. We want hundreds of thousands of small jurisdictions all competing for you. And if you're not getting what you want somewhere, you're going to free sticks and go. I mean, that's a very long-term time horizon.
So it's sort of similar to maybe Switzerland with the canton model, where you can, when it comes to taxes, where you pay tax, you can choose where you pay your taxes and they compete for your tax dollar. Is that similar?
I don't know about that, actually.
That's very interesting. So this fascinates me. Taxes fascinate me as a subject.
Really?
Well,
you can come do mine then.
Well, in that we all hate paying taxes.
Yeah, really do.
But
it's painful, in fact.
Yeah, it's painful, but it's like a spectrum. So not all taxes are as bad as each other, So for me, value-added tax actually isn't that bad, because if you're rich, you buy more stuff. So you don't have to buy the stuff. So there's an aspect of voluntarism to it. You're going to lose half your listenership right now. But then
no, we've got. I mean, we're into different ideas. No one in our movement wants to stop anyone else doing anything. They want them to try it out.
Yeah. So in Switzerland, this fascinates me. Is most Swiss people, they don't mind paying taxes, which is incredible, because even people who are like lefty hate paying taxes. No one celebrates the fact that they're paying for the roads and the parks and whatever else, because they know also that they're paying for war and they're paying for whatever, and it's under threat of violence and blah, blah, blah. Whereas in Switzerland, people generally don't mind paying taxes. I actually put a poll. There's a Bitcoin Switzerland group, brilliant group, Bitcoin Swiss. The Swiss Bitcoiners are great. There's a big group. There's about, I'd say it's 500 plus people on a Telegram group. And I put a poll on there because I was really interested. I was like, okay, so I said, because I said it to someone, I think it was Fairchaff actually, me and Fairchaff were talking about it. And I said, Swiss people generally don't mind paying taxes, which is weird. I agree, that's weird. I actually put that poll on the Bitcoin Switzerland group, and it was like 62% of people said, yes, we don't mind paying taxes in a Bitcoin group on Telegram. That's bizarre because, Bitcoin is, out of all people, don't like paying taxes. So, but I think the difference is that it doesn't just go into a bucket and pay for war. They can opt where they sell their tax. They give their taxes. The cantons, they give their taxes to. So all the cantons compete. You can even pay taxes in a separate canton if you want to. 99.9% of it goes on stuff you see. It's like, I've, spent some taxes buying something, value-added tax, and then some flowers appear on the side of the road or something. Like, they see it. So like, there's a great book by, do you know, who's that British? He's a kind of a right-wing guy. He was a BBC guy. Oh, what's his name? Dominic Frisby.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Dominic Frisby. He wrote a book, Daylight Robbery, the history of taxes or the future of taxes or something. He's a Bitcoiner. And right. It was the first, have you read that book?
No. I know him though.
He did a fantastic audiobook where he reads it. He's got a lovely voice and he reads the book, and it's like, it's examining the history of taxes, how taxes evolved over the years, and where he thinks taxes might end up going. And as a, kind of quite right-leaning Bitcoiner, I think he's quite pragmatic in his, they're basically always going to exist until we move to, your cypherpunk crypto-anarchist utopia of free cities and whatever else. Like, this thing's always going to exist. So he sort of analyzes tax legislation. Like in the UK, I think we have the biggest tax legislation in the world. Whereas I think it's maybe Hong Kong Island. I think they've got the smallest. It's like just fits on an A4 page.
Do you know where it does have the smallest? Smaller than that, Sark. They've got one page to do your tax return. When you were speaking about that, it just made me think, I suspect that the main thing that means that people won't mind paying taxes is how local are the proceeds of those taxes going. That's about it.
That's it.
Because most people, right or left, care about their community. In my experience, anyway, there's no difference there's no political way to care about where you live.
Yeah.
If you've got a neighbour, you look after them.
Yeah.
And if you're paying taxes to someone and it's helping your neighbour, it's the same thing as you helping them if they fall over on the driveway or something. It's exactly the same thing. This is where all this hatred for tax comes. Plus, obviously, some tax rates are incredibly high. I think 50%, 40%. I think that's too much to pay because you're obviously getting a bad service. Because when you look at the people that spend tax money, I don't know who it was I saw on Nostr this morning.
Oh, they're awful.
Somebody did a graph about, where the money comes from. Is it someone else's money or is it your money? I think it was who does Bitcoin Audible? What's his name?
Yeah, I know.
Him. Yeah. He'd done that guy. He'd done a graph of where the money comes from. Is it free or did you earn it? And where's it spent? Is it someone you know or someone or you or something? Yeah. And how much you care about what happens to the money? And according to his graph, obviously,
like a
government. No. It was a graph in the form of an X.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
But government existed in this bottom left-hand corner, which was don't care about the outcome, don't care where it came from, kind of thing, because they don't, it's like it's so inefficient, it's so obviously misused.
Oh man,
I
remember when I worked for education. I was a teacher and I worked for education. We had this small teaching unit. And we had this big old photocopier, and it took up a whole room, this photocopier. And I was like, I want to get rid of this thing because it takes up a whole room. We could use this as a teaching room. And it didn't work. So I had this maintenance number on it. So I was like, okay, so I'm going to track down where this, how we can get rid of this thing. So I phoned the local council and, with the council, who I was working for. And then, anyway, it worked out that this photocopier had been there for like 30 years or something. And it was still, they were still paying like £100 a month maintenance fee on it. No one had ever used it. And I was like, Christ. So then I went around, because we had all these old laptops then in a cupboard, like, 90s laptops. So then I go to all these old 90s laptops. We're paying maintenance fees on that as well. And I worked out that if we just like made something of an effort, spent a week like cancelling all these subscriptions and maintenance fees for all these different pieces of hardware, that our little teaching unit was going to save like 20 grand a year or 30 grand a year. It almost came close to like the cost of another teacher. I was like, this is insane. And I was like, that is just our little crappy unit on it's a small teaching unit because we were teaching like youth offending, those sorts. And, on the outskirts of town. And I was thinking, well, what's it like in the council civic centre? And what's it like? Yeah, what's the belly of the beast? What's it like in these big schools? And they're so bad at spending money. Like they just burn through it. And yeah, they don't.
Talking of ideology and spending money and all this kind of stuff. Did I hear right, talking to you once a few years ago, I think it was, you live in a kind of anarchist community or ANCAP? What is it?
They're sort of accidental anarchists. They would hate me calling it that.
Can you describe it? Even is it?
Yeah. So in Wales, we've got this really interesting. So the farmers in Wales along the coast, if they had land they couldn't really farm, like forest or was on a hill or whatever, they couldn't be house farming it. They would let miners come and build little holiday chalets as a sort of like Welsh solidarity thing. They would let all these miners from the valleys have all these beautiful memories of going down to the valleys and the beaches and having all these wonderful summer holidays. And then I think during the war, some of them became occupied permanently. And then in sort of the 60s, some of the hippies took over on some of them. And then
are they made of stone and stuff?
No, they're timber built. It's very interesting. It's kind of like frontier stuff, like lots of porches, wooden porches. They look like something from a frontier. I mean, our one actually. It's got some incredible history. I don't want to dox myself, so I won't go on about the incredible history of it. But they're timber framed. They have these little porches. They follow kind of a similar design. They look like something out of the American Wild West frontier. And there's just these little pockets of them all the way across the hutting communities across the South Wales coast. Yeah, it's really interesting. But some of them just ended up becoming, caravan parks, I suppose. Some of them ended up with brick sort of bungalows, which were rented out by, as holiday places. Other ones kind of slipped through the net in that the person who owned them didn't maintain them. They would just get kind of a token rent of however much a year. And then they weren't being used by the families. No, they weren't being used. Oh no, so the people were living in them, but they were kind of too much of a pain in the ass and because there was a historical connection as well. Local councils didn't really want to impose building regulations and rules, and they're also temporary structures too, because they're timber framed and they don't have foundations. You
can't move them though. They're not on wheels or anything.
No, they're not on wheels. No. Yeah, there's that funny thing in Scotland where as long as you had a wheel on your house, you could call it a.
Well, that's still true in everywhere.
Go and bolt a wheel on the side of a house. You
can move it 3 feet.
Yeah, 3 feet.
A lot of people do that, live in yurts and benders and stuff and do that.
Yeah. So they're all at different stages and of kind of development, and they've all been developed differently. But there's a few of them near us where there's these beautiful little timber framed houses, completely off grid, sustainable in the woods. Lovely location, really nice for families. All the kids play together and there's communal areas and we have like communal activities. And because it kind of fell through the gaps, and it meant that there was a lot of self-management which had to happen. So the communities had to engage with each other. The people had to engage with each other over maintenance of tracks, of communal spaces, paths, and those sorts of things. So shockingly bad roads because no one wants to pay to maintain the roads. But the what's nice about it is the kind of constant line of communication we have with your neighbours. So most of the people who live there, they wouldn't call themselves anarchists or anything. They're just people who live off grid in the woods, and they just want to live that type of life. But anarchism is kind of it's extreme democracy from the bottom up almost. So you're doing a lot of local decision making. And then you're not reliant so much upon, law and state and stuff to intervene. So with us, there's not really clear boundaries as to where one property begins and one property ends. It's all quite blurry. So there's a lot of negotiation with neighbours. And it can be a pain in the ass sometimes, and you just kind of want a definitive line which, you know, the law says this is where my house ends, this is where yours begins. But I think there's actually something quite healthy about having to coordinate with people and come to kind of agreements with people. So yeah, no, it's very, so that more recently, I developed like a polling piece of software where anyone can suggest a poll. So, you know, it's like, I want to use this new aggregate on the track because it will last longer than the other aggregate we used in the past. It's not going to wash down the hill. And you can suggest that as a poll, yes, no, or this type of aggregate, this type of, give them a choice. Anyone can suggest a poll. And then there's like a steering group who are just volunteers who kind of help lubricate that, and they have to approve the poll. Basically says like, you know, 4 of them out of 7 have to approve it, and if they approve it, it goes live and everyone can vote, and everyone's got their own keys. I'm not using public key cryptography, but I really wanted to build it on Nostr because I actually think a polling software like that on Nostr would be really useful for I don't know, for group decision making in a cooperative or in a communal space or whatever, or as a community group. But one day it'll turn into a Nostr thing. So currently it's like a, you know, it's kind of a centralized server thing which it all sits on, but there is some anonymous polling in it. But that's been a lot of fun to kind of like bring in some technology to try and smooth and I think it's so like, historically as well, they would have meetings maybe every couple of months, and they would always erupt into these horrible arguments, and everyone would hate each other. Some people would start fighting each other in the corner over stupid stuff, you know, like the path or the track or whatever. But then we have a WhatsApp group, and people are in constant communication on WhatsApp. And then those meetings now are far less like heated, confrontational, because there's always this like pressure release thing happening, and there's less kind of Chinese whispers and people, you know, like taking sides with each other or whatever. So when you talk about printing press, like just having the right tooling, and a chat app is a great bit of tool which you can use to, you know, make these things more sustainable, and then building something like the polling software helps it as well. So I think like, yeah, so I've enjoyed that side of it. And then obviously thinking maybe a little bit more, I suppose, like actively thinking philosophically about it, knowing something about anarchism and those sorts of like traditions, then I see a lot of that in it.
I've got a lot of questions about that. Do you mind me prying into it?
Yeah.
Number one, how do you know all the other people that live there? Number two, do people own these or rent them? I don't know. Who owns the land?
It kind of depends. So some of them, they've managed to secure the freehold in a trust, and then that's managed by the community. Some of them are still privately owned, and they pay like a token rent
to the family in the valley,
to the original farmer who owned it or whatever. To the
farmer.
Yeah, or the original farmer
owned by the people that used.
No. They would just. It was like a Welsh solidarity thing. The farmers would allow the miners to come, and they just charge them a token rent. They had a similar system in Scotland with the lords, because the lords owned all the land, and then you would pay something called a few, which was a similar thing. You had 50 quid a year, 100 quid a year, or something, just so you're acknowledging that they actually do own it, but. Yeah, you've been there for 50 years, 100 years or whatever. And then I think it was in the 70s or the 80s in Scotland, the government said that because people had lived on this land for like 200 years or whatever, and they no longer wanted us to have like this sort of serf relationship with a lord, the government said that the lords had to allow the people who lived there to purchase the land as a freehold. Whereas that hasn't happened in Wales, so... It's kind of up to the different communities. Some of them are privately owned, but they pay the token rent. Some of the people who own the land are very, you know, they like it, and they're proud of the thing which the people have built. Some of the landowners, they hate it and they just want to get them off so they can develop it because it's in this glorious spot. Some of them are owned by trusts and they've managed to collectively buy it, and some of them have bought them individually as freeholds as well.
But yours, like as a community, did you hear about when you know one of them coming up for rent or to buy because
loved it. Yeah,
you're friends with people there, and
that sort of stuff. Yeah. You got to like know somebody gets you in.
It's just like normal communities. I mean, there's a few in Herefordshire where I live. I've got friends living, but they're mainly very large stately homes that have been divided up. But I mean, talking from the governance side of it,
there's some of that in Copenhagen too, where they take
it's a really cheap way to do it,
apartment block or warehouse thing, and then they split it into little homes. Yeah.
Well, in the UK, because if you get a stately home, it may be £1.5 million, But between 20 of you'll get 50 acres with it, so you can develop
gorgeous lands. Yeah.
And you can. I mean, the one, I won't say which one it is, but there's one near me I've got a fair number of friends on it. They have their own animals there. They're even killing their own animals for meat. They've got, cool. And everyone in the community actually has to put in a bit of work. There's a certain amount of hours each week you have to do. But what I find interesting, because I've lived in a few similar scenarios to that in the past. And I came to the conclusion that the one that works best for me was the kind of, and don't take this the wrong way, it's a kind of autocracy, really. Someone owns the house, lays down the rules, and then everyone lives there under those rules. And they don't, that's the one that always worked best for me, because in the communities where people were discussing, it was very hard to make decisions because there was always some little personal spats going on. And someone would vote against something, not because they thought it was a bad idea, but because they knew that the person they didn't like.
I mean, that's why for most of human history we had feudalism and kings and lords and serfs and slavery, because it works. You just own some people, you tell them what to do. But is that in the interest of the liberty of the most amount of people?
Well, in the case of a house, so I'll give you an example. I lived in one, and it wasn't my house, but I knew what the rules were there. The guy that owned the house was a lovely dude, and it was a great experience, the whole thing. But the point was, there wasn't that kind of chaos of everyone having a say in the future of this thing.
Yeah.
He bought it with his money, and he made it a certain way and said, look, if you want to come and live here, come on. And as a result, there was a lot of good people living there, and I had 2 or 3 years of really amazing,
Yeah. Then he dies, passes on to his son, who's a nutter.
Well, yes. Well, you don't know that, but I'm not talking about the long-term strategy, because I mean, monarchies are the same as that. Yeah. Monarchies are great if the monarch's a great person,
exactly. Yeah.
But if his son's a douche or his daughter or whatever, you end up with a complete nightmare. I mean, what's your preferred
I think freedom's messy.
Yes.
It's like free and open source software. There's lots of conversation, there's arguments, things can sometimes move very slowly over decision making. But I kind of feel that's the cost of freedom. Like it requires that extra work, and it kind of requires that chaos to exist. But yeah, it's easier just to have someone own the things and be nice, and and have nice rules. But then you can't rely upon that long term. And if you're happy to just keep moving around, then maybe that model works for you, I suppose. But I prefer like the wisdom of the crowd type stuff, and everybody trying to come together to make collective decisions. And I feel like with the polling thing, so it's interesting because we're talking about like the threshold and the quorum. So how many of the homes need to vote in order for the vote to be valid, and then of whatever option they voted on, like what's the threshold for it to be a valid threshold? And I think it's to the point where it's a public declaration that most people want this outcome. So then there's a social pressure not to go against that. If you're in the 20% who didn't want that outcome, you're like, well, it's a bit like Bitcoin, isn't it? It's when we decide not to increase the block sizes, it's like, yeah, if you want, you can fork off and go somewhere else, or you can stay and, continue to push a narrative or whatever, or stay and continue to engage. Like, it's okay in it's okay in consensus mechanisms to be wrong and then to stay with the group of people which you're working with. And I actually think that is hard for a lot of people. And that's one of the things you learn when you live in those kind of like really
scenarios.
Yeah, really sort of democratic scenarios. Yeah, but it is very messy, and there's lots of arguments. But the software helps. And we all just, we can choose to go somewhere else if we're not happy with the way Bitcoin works. But most of us don't, we stay,
But that's we've recently been to Dubai a few times for free cities, and I'm impartial about Dubai. But what is interesting to me and what I do like is that as a sort of model, it really shows you that there are apolitical places which people actively choose not to vote on the outcome of, in the same way that you don't vote on the outcome of your latest phone. If you don't like it, you just buy the other phone. And in Dubai is the same in a sense that here's a product, Dubai, with all the stuff that comes along with it, the tall buildings, the history of, I don't know, forced labour. I don't know.
Yeah,
really.
that would be the criticism,
right? Of course, yeah. But you can choose to use this product, and if you do, good, and if you don't, you can go somewhere else. And in fact, if the product starts getting bad, you do go. You can actually go. But
I suppose that's freedom of movement and association, in that you wouldn't want a world just full of free cities. You would want a world of lots of different experiments in living. So some of them are free cities which are owned in kind of a corporate way.
Yes.
Some of them are shareholder based. Some of them, are maybe some sort of trust or something, and then some of them are maybe more cooperative. Some of them are very anarchist. But we certainly all want the ability to people experiment with parallel types of community building. Definitely.
Do you think one of the things that just unites all the things you just said as being positive is devolved, smaller versions of, is the problem we've got at the moment, these behemoths that like large places basically,
totally. I think that is the value and the tradition of anarchism, is having smaller communities. But then the issue with that was always, we live in a globalized world, and you need large apparatus to continue to live in a globalized world and enjoy all the things we have in our world. But then suddenly we get these things like Bitcoin, where we can have this global international apparatus which is owned by anybody, it's owned by the community and users as a whole. Or we can have something like Nostr, which is similar. So then it makes the anarchist stuff more it's potential to it's like we've said it before, like the tooling, you just need the correct tooling. But like that was always the biggest criticism of anarchism, is you're just going to reduce us all to living in small backwards communities because we're not communicating with each other, we're not trading with each other, we're not doing this with each other.
Was that?
Yeah, I mean that's for people looking in from the outside into anarchism, historically, before, when we didn't have the internet, when we didn't have free and open source and social networking protocols and free and open source money, that we would just look inward, and then we wouldn't continue advancing humanity as a whole, as a globalized society. But with these new international apparatus, you can have the best of both. You know what I mean? It's like that. Yeah, those things can exist, but they now no longer need to be controlled by governments, private interest. They can just be these apparatus, international apparatus.
It's kind of like the protocol thing is one of the important aspects of it.
Yeah,
the fact
free and open source protocol.
Yeah, the fact there is a protocol.
Yeah,
that seems to be an important part of it. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't have a preferred sort of governance model myself, other than the kind of leave me alone model.
Yeah.
But that doesn't really work.
That is funny, because that's what a lot of people say with us. If you say to them, oh, you're an anarchist, they're like, no, fuck off, I'm not an anarchist. I just want to be left alone. I want to live in my own little house. I don't want anyone to bother me. And that's it. They want to be left alone in the woods, and that's it.
But the answer to that is obviously, well, when you come out the woods to go to the shops, you're part of society. So what is your duty to society? And this is why I like this. One of the things interests me about, like, one arm of the Free Cities movement is the private cities place. And the interesting thing about that is there is actually a social contract. You sign it. Going back to what I was saying about, here are the rules. Yeah. Here is what you can and can't do here. Yeah. If you want to live here, sign this piece of paper and adopt the rules. And if you don't, then you'll either be kicked out.
Is that like Prospera in Honduras? Is that a private city?
Yes,
because we went
pretty
there
much
in the summer.
Yeah, you were doing something with them, because in busy Prague. I saw you at the Prospera ship doing something.
I was just hanging out and stealing their PowerPoints, so I could so I could charge my phone. But off the back of that, they invited me to go to Prospera, because we were going to talk about like LNBits, how they can use LNBits and the Nostr stuff there. And it was the scuba diving instructor. He was he'd been working as a scuba diving instructor in Prospera. He's the one who said that it'd be cool to have like Nostr badges, to award people with Nostr badges.
Right. I've been talking to Ben, as in Ben Gunn, about this same thing.
Yeah, that stuff. Yeah. So and then we went to Prague. They were amazing. They hosted us, so they gave us like a really nice pad for free. I took the family out there and we went on the beach and sort of chilled out and hung out in Prospera.
So
It's beautiful.
Give me your eye view of Prospera, because I wouldn't
So
necessarily
I went in
say...
I went in quite critically. You know, I was thinking, they're probably exploiting local workers, and it's probably a bunch of rich people, just, you know, a safe haven for rich people to put their money. And then, you know, so I spoke to a lot of the people working there, and they were all being paid more than they were in other places on the island. There had been a longevity human augmentation conference, which had just happened, and there was a bunch of them who were living in Honduras,
Mm-hmm.
and living on Roatan, the island of Roatan, and they were setting up companies, and they were employing local people, and they were trying to educate local people as well, because it benefited them, because then they could have more skilled workers. The Bitcoin, the Roatan Bitcoin Center, which is like just as you drive into Prospera,
Up on the hill there.
yeah, and they've got this huge wall with like dozens of, you know, I don't know, signed bits of, it's like all the different outreach work which they've done to all the local schools and then all the local businesses as well. And it's not just, you know, Bitcoin and stuff they're shilling, like it's like educational computer science programs. There's a whole bunch of, you know, so I was very pleasantly surprised. Yeah, I was like, you know, they're a good employer, and they're benefiting. They see the value in benefiting Roatan as a whole, which is what I go back to before with the idea of the industrialist, the local industrialist. That form of private capital is different because there is a vested interest. And actually, Adam Smith spoke about that with the invisible hand. And his idea, so his example was this psychopath British industrialist. They still had a vested interest in improving the lives of the people around them because it increased their own security, because they're less likely to get, you know, break-ins and people trying to steal their stuff. And that's true with Roatan. Like, and Prospera, like even if their intentions were completely selfish, like it makes sense for them to improve the lives of the people around them, because then they're safer, you know, and they can go out they're going out onto the island of Roatan and they can feel safer too.
Can you critique it for me? I want to know where you didn't feel comfortable. What was it about it that you thought, nah, you know?
It's almost like the Truman Show, in that everything looks great, and it's really pretty, and the food's great, the people are lovely, and they're a good employer. But it kind of felt synthetic,
mm-hmm.
almost, you know, like it was a product which is being sold. Which I'm sure some people don't mind, but for me, I was thinking, I mean, if I was a single digital nomad, and I could just work on my laptop, I'd probably still be there now, working on my laptop on the beach. And I would choose it as a place to stay, you know, particularly because you've got loads of Bitcoins going through and whatever. But yeah, no.
What about the kind of the moralistic, philosophical side of it? You know, where does it fall down? Because these are the questions I'm always asking.
As long as there's free access, like, and it's a Freedom of Movement Association, people can go in and out if they want to. They had like pretty heavily. There's quite a lot of security presence, but I suppose Roatan is a dangerous place, so it needs to do that still currently.
Not always as Honduras goes.
It's not as Honduras goes. It's not. No. But I mean, it's still kind of dangerous. But it was funny because the taxi driver, he was excited to go there when we got the taxi from the airport. He was excited to go to Prospera because he'd heard about it. You know, they'd obviously all talked about it on the island, but he hadn't been in. And we went in, and he was like, "Oh, a lot of police. There's a lot of police because there's all these people with guns walking around. You know, the security guards as you're driving in is well secured." But no, it was good. Like I said, I would be there if I didn't have a family, and you know, if I wasn't based in South Wales. I was just a single digital nomad. It would totally be on my list of places to live. And as it evolves, and maybe, I don't know, I suppose as more people kind of, I think they've done a great job in Prospera, in that they haven't just bought a parcel of land somewhere in Central America and been like, oh yeah, we're going to build this free city. And then you end up with a bunch of like well-meaning, not very productive management types talking about all the great work they're going to do and not actually anything really getting done. Which we've seen a lot in the free city movement, I think, is the the big promise, but then under delivering. And I think what Prospera did, which was very wise, is they bought something which was already pre-existing. So they bought this as like a golf resort, I suppose, built a whole load of extra properties on it, didn't actively go and shill it and talk about it and try and pull people in. It's only really now I've seen that even the website and stuff, like they've upgraded it, and you can see more of what it is and the marketing for it. So I think that was very wise play on their. So there really is something to go and look at now. I urge everyone to go and have a look at it. And the Roatan Bitcoin Center was amazing.
Well, I mean,
again, employing a local as a manager as well.
Well, in their constitution, they actually are not allowed. One of the rules of the ZAs, the Zones of Economic Development, which is what the whole reason that it's there, because they're it's like a version of a special economic zone. They're not allowed to. They have to employ at least a percentage of Hondurans, and I think it's 90 or 95. I can't remember which one it is. But it's interesting because they're now facing huge problems from the government of Honduras, who have now have said the original law that was passed to allow the creation of the ZAs, or there's only really two to speak of, is now they've rescinded the law. So
I suppose it's very easy for politicians or a particular political party, particularly if you're dealing with a whole bunch of poor people, to then point at the rich people and say, yeah, we need to strip their rights away because they have more rights than you do and they have more access to stuff than you do, which is a shame. But I guess maximize the outreach, because if they really, one of the things I noticed on Roatan is everybody hates the energy provider in Roatan. It's a diesel power station, and they're crap, and there's always power cuts all the time, and apparently they charge an absolute fortune for power. All the locals hate them. I think they're like a French company or something. So in my head, I was like, well, one of the best things that they've got, it's a beautiful place, it's always sunny. Like, one of the best things which Prospera could do is put down a whole load of solar farms and start offering some, cheap renewable energy to the locals and start developing that stuff. And then if there is political pressure from whatever political party to, scapegoat the Free City or whatever, which has bought some land, then the public would also have their back and say, no, actually these people have done it's that Adam Smith thing again. So, I mean, I hope that they succeed, but if it is just in the line of experiments, I hope people learn from that, and then in the future they improve the lives of the people around them, just so they have that political power and pushback against, the being pointed at as a.
I think I'm gonna. That's going to be one of my takeaways from this conversation which is obviously true, that if you create something and you're positively affecting the lives of the people around you,
they'll support you.
You'll be supported, yeah. And the problem, I suppose, with Prospera is that it's a small space with a boundary, and they're just getting going. This is the thing. I mean, obviously Prospera, and because their model is really instead of to get a load of money and build all this stuff, they're getting investors to build things. So they would have a hospital there at some point. And I'm pretty sure the only hospital on Roatan recently burnt down, and it wasn't a very good hospital anyway. So those are the kind of places where you might see those kind of benefits that are, apart from, because a lot of people would just talk about, well, we're creating jobs for Hondurans, and they are 100%. Almost everyone that works there, and
bringing in industry as well.
They are, but that's not to everyone. That's not everyone's cup of tea. A lot of people might be like, well, I don't care. I live in this lovely beachside place next door, and everything's cool, and I don't necessarily need that. But hospitals and things like that, they're really
energy being an energy provider as well. Yeah. Stuff which is really sought after by the locals.
Listen, mate, it's almost pitch black in here.
It's totally dark.
We haven't got any lighting in here,
and I get the feeling we could just carry on talking indefinitely.
We could, but we've been going nearly 2 hours already, and
it's a lot of fun.
I'm happy you've talked about. I didn't realize you actually went to Prospera. That's really, really interesting.
Again, it was a really good learning experience. So I think it's important to, obviously question your own assumptions on stuff. Like, I was very critical of the idea of citadels and free cities, and Prospera was a big part of me kind of turning that around and seeing that they were a net positive force for Roatan, and for the people of Roatan, you know?
Well, I mean, the problem I've been on this journey for 2 years, and I'm constantly challenging
yourself,
my beliefs about it.
Should, yeah.
But the thing that always will bug me is this connection with neocolonialism and gated communities and all this kind of stuff. It's very hard to escape from.
Yeah.
I mean, like I say, even Prospera, when you look at it, like you say, there's a reason why they need security, right? But from the outside, that looks really bad for some reason, even though you go inside, Hondurans everywhere, living a great life, you know.
And not just people working there as well. There was lots of Hondurans who were just
all the
holidaying there. And there was a wedding, and there were Hondurans who were having a wedding there when we were there, this beautiful wedding. So it's not just it's not like you go there and it's just like, you know, I don't know, like whites everywhere, you know, like it's clearly local people are accessing the facilities of Roatan. Of Prospera, sorry. So it's not as neo-colonialist as I thought it was initially going to be.
Well, I mean, what would the colonialist part of it would be? The capital that comes in owns the people, but the point is, it doesn't really in that sense.
I mean, that's like here at the Celtic Manor, isn't it? I mean, the guy's bought this lovely plot of land. He's got a big fat golf course, but he employs loads of locals. I suppose maybe the disparity of it, if you have somewhere which feels very affluent and luxurious, and then you walk outside and it's close to lots of people, you know, on the poverty line or whatever, and then it's hard to make that kind of logical leap that there would be some trickle down and that some of the revenue being generated here would go into the local economy. And I guess that's why these projects, which are going into poorer regions, which are very attractive because they're in beautiful locations and they have cheap land, that they just really should just like do as much outreach as possible and get the locals on side.
Well, interestingly, and you probably don't know about this, but there is another ZA, which is in Honduras, called Morazan.
Is it?
Which is only, they call it the blue collar ZA, whereas in there are 60 families living there, all Hondurans working.
Oh, okay.
And actually, but it's interesting because it's owned by one gentleman, and he rents the units to them at a very low cost. And so their standard of living is higher and cheaper than outside. It's a completely different model. Like the Prospera model is, we'll get people to come in here and build it with their own money, you know. Whereas Massimo, he's the guy that kind of made all his money in pharmaceuticals. Yeah. But this is his passion project, and he really loves this place. Yeah. It's his whole life's work. He's created this using the ZA law. He's created this place where they're building houses, but he owns the whole thing. So they're not doing it on the same model, and it's very interesting. Very interesting. But anyway, that's for another conversation. Look, we've got to stop, mate, because I can't even see my notes anymore. Right, thanks for that.
Cheers, man.
Appreciate you taking the time to talk. And
then everyone just a reminder, if you go to nostr.com and get an Epo5, use the promo code Timothy and you get 20% off.
Yeah, and I'm going to just say it again. I think that might be a little life hack in the same sense that 20, what would it be? 20, like say 30 years ago, you might have been able to buy timothy.com for like $5.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Free a lot, but the URLs originally, they were free. You could just get a URL, but people didn't take too many because they were aware that other people would want to. Oh, there's the guy who owns, I think, frog.com, who's talking about it, and he's like, yeah, I mean, you could just free. You could just take a URL.
Dude,
we didn't take them all because we wanted other people to have access to it.
I had a website in 1998, and I remember I picked a stupid. I didn't.
You could have picked like.
I could have picked all kinds of things, and I picked a ridiculous.co.uk. I didn't even get a .com. I didn't even understand. I thought, I think a lot of people were a bit naive back then, and we were all a bit honest. And I thought, well, I'm a British company. I'll get a .co.uk, and it's ridiculous because I should be sitting on a bunch of them now.
Well, something. So like, sorry, it just made me think of something else. I was going to go on a little tangent, but no, I was just going to say one of the other benefits of Nostr.com is if you put in like nostr.com /@ your name, so at Timothy, then it'll bring up njump. So it'll have like, it's like a profile page with your most recent posts. And then also you can select different Nostr clients. But we actually started having that available to search engines, for crawling. Because this is a big issue with Nostr, is like you search for something in Google.
It doesn't exist.
Nothing exists. So it's really hard to kind of get the word out. Like you want, like a Twitter post will come up by Jack Dorsey. You want that to happen for Nostr as well, because these are public posts, aren't they? They're not like their private posts.
Oh yeah, I forgot. I didn't realize. I didn't maybe think about that.
Yeah, so we've built that into Nostr.com as well. So if you get an Hippo5 on there, you get some, what's it called, search engine visibility. And
correct me if I'm wrong now, because I've only just done that today.
Yeah.
If I say to someone now, come and find me on Nostr, Timothy@nostr.com. If they type that into one of the clients, like one of the social media clients, my profile will come up.
Yeah, it'll come up there.
Right, brilliant. Because that really explains it well. Like I had one, Timothy@iris.to, which was the first browser I ever used a couple of years ago. But that really explains it to me. It's like, this is me at Nostr. Yeah. End of. Right, brilliant. Thanks, Ben.
I like the way you called the client a browser just then. That was good.
Well, it is a browser.
It's a browser.
Yeah. It's like like the same as
Yeah, nice.
See.
Cool.
Anyway, thanks, Ben,
Cheers,
and see you another time.
Thanks,
you.
Bye.